Welcome to Hear Me Out. I'm your host, Spencer Demetros. Today we're going to start with a question, and that is, why has everything gotten so incredibly complicated? It seems like we've taken the parts of life that used to be fairly simple and made them a stress-filled race to nowhere that sucks up way more time and effort than they should. Today's show is dedicated to one of those areas, which is the college search and admissions process. We're excited to have as our guest today Dr. Linzy Brekke-Aloise, who will provide insight into the college process and help us understand why things have gotten so out of control. Dr. Eloise is the founder of Find Your Fit Higher Education Consulting that helps guide high school students and their families through the college search and admissions process. She's also a distinguished author and college professor who earned her doctorate from Harvard University and is the recipient of numerous awards, including the American Association of University Women Fellowship. She'll give us her thoughts on how parents and students can do de-stressing college process. She'll also provide guidance on what to focus on in order to maximize students' chances of getting into the right school for them that will provide an environment in which they'll thrive and best prepare for a bright future. We have a great show for you today, so stay tuned. We're very pleased to have as our guest today Dr. Linzy Brekke-Aloise, who's going to share her wisdom today on the college selection and application process. So thank you so much for being here and welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
So as I mentioned in the intro, one of your many accomplishments is that you are founder of your consulting firm, Find Your Fit Higher Education Consulting. So could you please tell us just a little bit about your firm and some of the services you provide?
Yeah. So we are a sort of small student-centered boutique firm specializing in helping high school students apply to college and college students apply to graduate school. We also do some consulting for recent college graduates because that's an area where there's just not a lot of people helping recent college graduates to sort of find their career fit. So we do that as well.
Excellent. So let's get into some of the specifics of the first phase of the process, which is the college selection process. So for the high school kids and their parents out there who are listening, what's a good first step in the process of selecting a college that would be the right fit?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a different approach than I think a lot of the guidebooks and the worksheets, which is to say, focus on the student. The student is the star of the show, not the school. And social media and popular culture and television shows, TikToks, have made students really obsessed with certain schools and certain brands, and they have the pennants and the sweatshirts. And so they start the process off at the end rather than focusing on themselves. So I really want everyone in the process to say, okay, who is my student? Or if the student, who am I? How do I learn best? And so start thinking about, do I want to live in a city? Do I want to live in a small town? Do I want to have seminars with discussions? Do I want to be in a large lecture? Really start with you, the student, and parents. Start with your kid and what you know to be true about them. Don't focus on like, oh, the top 10 or 15 schools in this guidebook, and then just rush there, because then it's the Cinderella principle. You're trying to make the student fit into that shoe that might not fit them. But if you start with them, then you can say, okay, this is how my student, and then search out those schools that fit them.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So you mentioned a couple of them, do I like city or small town? What are some of the big factors about, kids' characteristics, qualities, preferences that we should focus on in deciding on, what would make them happy?
Right. So think about who their friends are now. They're not going to be a totally different person in college. Absolutely, they want new and different experiences, more diverse experiences, but who are their friends now? Do they run in a pack with a large group, or do they have 2 or 3 friends that they really like to spend quality time with? Do they want to go to the movies? Do they want to go to concerts? Do they want to go to the big game and paint their face blue and white? Then you would want a student who has a smaller friend group. They're going to want probably a smaller community, a place where they can feel known. The professors are going to know their names. They're going to be in smaller seminars. A student who runs with a larger pack, who's involved with lots of sports team and likes to be really busy and really wants that big game, tailgating on the weekends atmosphere, there's all kinds of great schools for that student. But the student who wants the smaller friend group is not going to thrive necessarily in that kind of huge, 20,000 student population environment.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So I'm going to confess to you, I am a parent of twins. They are seniors in high school. I'm also going to confess, so we are in this process.
Yep.
I'm also going to confess to you that I am one of those probably horror story parents that you see all the time in your practice. So as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, and I want your feedback, your guidance. I'm thinking, so when I look at some of the qualities of my kids and what they actually enjoy as their parent, I'm thinking, well, when they go to college, I want them to kind of expand beyond that.
Sure.
And I'm always kind of at this tension between, I want them to be happy and comfortable,
Right.
on the one hand, and on the other, I don't want them to stagnate. I mean, we live in a very small town.
Right.
They're very tight with a very small group of friends. And I want them to kind of expand themselves. So when they pick their ideal dream school, and I'm looking and I'm like, okay, this is looking an awful lot like, what their situation is, I'm kind of like, okay, maybe I need to nudge them into like the next stage.
Yeah. So, I mean, small colleges are 2,000 to 2,500 students. And that is not the size of most high schools. So I do say to students and their families, I recognize that, but if your high school is 400 students and you go from, or 600 students and you go from 600 to 2,500,
Yeah.
that is bigger and it is more diverse. And colleges are also quite specific, right? So you're going to get a lot of niche. So it's not just your high school times 4, it's actually your kind of students, your people, all in one place.
Right.
So it's going to expand them and push them outside of their comfort zone no matter what the size.
Right.
And certainly it's going to push them and expand them intellectually.
Yeah.
And they're going to be students from all over the world and from so many different backgrounds that I wouldn't worry about that. That would
Yeah.
not be one of the things I would worry about. What I would worry about is really asking yourself honestly as a parent, will my student consistently attend class in a large lecture hall? If the professor doesn't ever get to know their name, or a graduate student or a TA is teaching the class, your student really needs to be self-motivated, self-driven, and extremely disciplined to go to class consistently and to keep up with the work, right? There's no professor or they don't know a core group of their best friends in that class.
Sure.
So think about that
That's
more
a good
importantly.
point. I mean, I will say, we did do the college tour thing in April, and we've gone to a few others. And what the big schools will say to that is, yeah, and it's in the stats, right? They can't deny that they have lectures with 300
Right.
kids, and often there are a lot of freshman classes, right? They will say, but we have small group sessions with,
Yes.
and they're TAs, I think
Yep.
that
They are.
and that's their response to that. So
Right.
what do you say to that?
Again, that works with a lot of learners. It absolutely can work. They have small discussion sections led by a graduate student, teaching fellow, or teaching assistant, and they are extremely gifted graduate students to be sure. But you just have to make sure that your student wants that and will learn that way. And not every student does. Some students, they go to college to study with a renowned professor, and so that just might not work for their learning style.
Yeah. What you're saying is resonating with me because the town we live in is a very small town, and a lot of the kids, I would say the vast majority of them want not so much small schools because they're used to that. They want big schools.
Yep.
They want really big schools. And, my daughter likes the little friend group she has and all that, but, she and my son both want big school.
Yep.
And, she has struggled a bit, and I keep saying to her, you got to focus on the fact that, you have good support from your teachers right now. And at these big schools, you're just not going to have that. So and not just with my kids, but I just see it in our town. The kids are just, having their head. They want big football team, and all that. So,
but that's social media and TikTok, and there's just a massive shift in the higher education landscape towards urban schools and towards larger schools because they see the big game. They see TikToks where there's tailgating and people are dressed up and painted, and so they're like, well, that's what fun at college looks like. They're not really thinking about the day-to-day, like, okay, I'll have to take a bus around campus.
Yeah.
right? I have to wait and I'll have to take a bus,
Absolutely.
or I
Absolutely.
might not get the classes I want. Which is not to say there is nothing wrong with large institutions. It's just a larger institution has to be a fit for your student, and and we want them to graduate.
Yeah.
And we are seeing unprecedented rates of students dropping out, transferring, and flunking out.
Right.
So that's why that fit proposition needs to be there, because ultimately at the end of the day, the students, I want them to have a great time and have a fantastic social life and to make lifelong friends, but they need to get a degree, and they are there for their education. And I do feel that TikTok and social media and sort of Gilmore Girls and television shows are really, students are missing the plot. They're losing the plot a bit.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was putting the college list together for my kids, I forgot the name of the book. It's the Bible on...
The Fisk Guide to Colleges?
Yes. I had the Fisk Guide, and I'm going through and all that, and every time I'd mention a school, my daughter Coco would get out her phone, and she'd go on TikTok.
Right.
And she would be like, oh, that looks good. And they'd talk about, like, you know, the food in the cafeteria, and you'd see the kids partying and all that. So you are dead on with what's going on there. So,
well, it's branding and
yeah.
marketing,
Yeah.
and the best branders and the best marketers are sort of winning a greater share of the higher education of college applicants.
Yeah.
But branding is not learning.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's a great point. So I mentioned the college visits. I've done some. I think most parents, by the time their kids are seniors, have done at least a few.
Right.
How important are they? And in what stage of the process is the best time to do the college visits?
That's a fantastic question. So I find them to be critical. And I work with international families as well, families who would never in another country like France ever tour a college. That's just not part of the process there. And all of their feedback is, Lindsay, I'm so glad you stressed to us the importance of getting boots on the ground on a campus, because it's really helped my student feel out the theoretical proposition of large versus small, urban versus suburban. So I think they're absolutely critical. I know they're a massive investment of time and resources for families, but teenagers are really not theoretical. They're not great abstract thinkers. They need to try something on for size. They need to picture themselves in the dorm, in the lab, in the classroom, in the cafeteria. They need to eat the food. They need to feel out, as my daughters would say, the vibe, right, of a school. And so it's critical. And also, it enables you to really sort of kick the tires, look under the hood. Don't just trust marketing and branding, but really talk to the reference librarians, look at the study spaces, look at the classroom. Does it have innovative technology? What do the learning spaces look like? Does it look like an inviting place to learn, or is it a large sort of worn out lecture hall from 35, 40 years ago?
Yeah, for sure.
You see that firsthand.
Right. One thing I noticed, though, and there's got to be some studies on this, that, you know, the day that you see the school, the weather has such a big impact.
Enormous.
It's crazy. 'Cause
Yes.
I remember, you know, I went to Lehigh undergrad, and when I saw it,
Great
it was
school, yeah.
beautiful. Oh, thank you. It was beautiful. It was gorgeous. It was like the first spring day. You know, that day when, like, everybody's outside and everybody's, like, got the windows rolled down on their car, and I was just like, I'm going there, you know. And as it turned out, I liked it. But
The weather and the tour guide. If you have a
tour
tour
guide,
guide that
yes.
you like the school. If you are an engineering major or potential engineering major and you have a tour with a tour guide who's a theater major, students will make really quick, snap decisions. Oh, I don't like the school. It's an art school. No, it has a school of engineering,
Right.
but your tour guide was from a different field. And so I try to coach my families to really be quite intentional about the way that they tour a school. So to really try to see if you can take a tour with a STEM major if your student's interested in STEM, with an arts or humanities major if that's what your student's interested in, if it's possible, and sometimes it is. I like open houses. I know some families don't want to go when there's hundreds of families there because that feels overwhelming, but you do have more tours, you have access to professors, student panels, admissions officers, the president of the college or the university, right? So it's a really great, and they have open houses right now in October and November for families, and it's a way to get multiple data points. That tour is just one data point.
So one last question on the tour thing. Does it matter? Does it help in terms of getting a check in the box from the admissions office if you went on a tour? Like, do they care?
So I really try to caution families to try not to approach the college search process as a kind of series of boxes to be checked.
Yeah.
What they're looking at is, did you get to know us? So there are real humans and amazing professionals who are idealists and optimists and care deeply about the education of students. And they're not, so they don't see it as a checkbox, but what you taking a tour does is help them say, wow, you really came to us, you got to know us. We're not just a school that you're tossing an application onto. And it is true, right? Like you saw the classrooms, you saw the library, you saw the dining hall, you saw the, so that's what they're interested in. And because students are applying to more and more colleges every year, they need that reassurance that they're looking at the applicant saying, okay, you got to know us and you're applying to us because in that process, you feel that we're a fit for you. And that obviously makes you a stronger applicant.
Yeah, that makes sense. So one of the things you just mentioned, which is very interesting, is, I hate to sound like the old timer. It's like back in my day, back in my day,
Right, right.
I applied to, I think, 5 colleges,
Right.
that was the average at that time.
Yep.
Now, it's not unheard of for kids to be applying to 20 colleges or more.
Yep.
So what do you think's driving that? And do you feel like there's, an optimum number that kids should be applying to?
Yeah, excellent point. So students are applying to more colleges and they're applying farther afield. So more and more students are applying in Canada or the UK, for example. That has grown because of the Common Application, and you can apply to more in one single platform. But also as the applicant pool for colleges in the United States has grown, and I want to make it clear that is a very real demographic reality. So the opening up of China, the ending of the Soviet Union, the sort of rising tide of economic development around the world, social media, television, the internet has made learning about college and the college application process more accessible to students around the globe and also within the United States. So we have truly objectively a more diverse applicant pool and a bigger applicant pool. The United States is the #1 destination for college in the world. California and New England are the top destinations within the United States.
Got it.
So families and students are reacting to decreasing admission rates. So in 1989, Columbia University accepted 38% of its applicants. Last year, it accepted fewer than 3%.
Wow.
So that's real. That's a real change. And so families are reacting that anxiously by casting a wider net and sort of hedging their bets against that insecurity by applying to more colleges.
Yeah.
I think, and I say this to my students and my families, 10 excellently crafted, thoughtful applications are far superior to 20 slapdash thrown together applications. That being said, students should craft a balanced list. They should have schools that are above their sort of academic GPA and profile, right at their profile, and a little bit below their profile. So that's what we call a balanced list.
Yeah.
And that's a better hedge. They should like the list top to bottom, but I think I can tell you, because I've had increasing numbers of meetings with families because they apply to more schools, that then when they have 8 or 9 acceptances that they're looking at, well, that's a challenging decision-making process.
Sure.
So you're like hedging your bets, but then you're creating challenges for yourself on the other end.
Right, makes sense. Yeah, I mean, the acceptance rates nowadays, it's almost made it a little bit of a crapshoot, right? So
I think that's what families believe, and I
Yeah.
would say I really want to caution everyone against thinking that college admissions is a game. It isn't. These are professionals and institutions deeply committed to educating our children and the next generation. And they're trying to do that as fairly and as equitably and as broadly as possible. So it isn't a game, like if you check boxes. These are real, thoughtful people and professionals reading these applications, and they really can tell a student who jumped through a hoop and checked a box off from a student who did something out of passion, out of intellectual curiosity, out of like a genuine altruistic desire to make a difference. And so I don't want students trying to check boxes off. I want them learning about themselves. I want them cultivating their character, cultivating their intellectual curiosities and passions, and then just telling that story with schools.
Yeah.
I think and then thinking about, schools are very obvious. You go on their websites, you take tours, you attend information sessions. They will tell you, we want leaders, we want change makers. Another school will say, we really want students passionate about community service. Another place, we really want students passionate about conducting research. Well, often these are not the same student.
Right.
So a student who really has loved doing scientific research with their teacher in high school or during a summer program, that's the right fit for them. But they haven't done a lot of community service. So why are they applying to a school that really says, we want students passionate about working in communities?
Yeah.
Right? It's not going to be the same fit.
Right.
And they ought to, again, be mindful about who they are and what the institution's values are, and make an alignment. That's the fit.
Yeah. No, it's a good case for, as the kids go through this process, really understanding the core differences between these colleges, and not just looking at, 2 or 3 qualities and, kind of quickly formulating a list, but really kind of digging deeper,
Right.
And seeing if they align with what they're about.
Right. And
So-
they will tell you, they're very clear. And you can even look, is the front page of the website game day and your face painted in orange? Well, then they're telling you this is a core part of the experience here.
Right.
If you don't like doing that in your high school, if you don't ever go to Friday Night Lights, then why would that be a fit for you,
Yeah.
right? They'll show you students and they're all dressed up and they're in a community and they're working in a community garden or a soup kitchen or doing service. Well, they're telling you very transparently, like, hey, we want our students to be out there in the community, sharing their education with our town, our city, our community, right? They'll tell you that. And so again, if you are like, oh, community service, I don't really want to do that, then that's not fit for you.
Yeah.
And I think we should just own it. I want the student to feel really confident about who they are and own it, and then make that match.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's the kids should really heed that advice. I think that's a good point. So, we talked about one big change is the number of applicants.
Right.
Another big change that I'm seeing is, it seems like back in the day, there was more of an emphasis on going to college, getting a well-rounded education, trying a lot of different things, and figuring out what you want for your life. A lot of kids at the age of 17 don't know what they want to be when they grow up.
Right.
Obviously, if you think you want to be an engineer, you're going to have to focus on, STEM, science, technology, math, whatever. But a lot of kids don't. But it seems like there's a little pressure coming from above that are saying, you really should kind of figure out what you want to do after college and find the college that has the program you want.
Right.
And it's almost like they're locking kids in sooner than they should be.
Right.
What's your thoughts on that?
So I think that colleges ask the question in a lot of their essays, what do you want to study here and why? And what have you done to pursue that interest throughout your high school experience, right? And so that, I think students and families read that as saying, oh, you have to know. But they're really asking for you to sort of imagine and to just say what you're interested in. And so you don't have to study that. It's not, like a contract, but they're saying, like, what have you liked in high school? What have you been passionate about? Maybe you took an A push class and you talk about that. They're absolutely not expecting students to know what they want to do, but they want them to dream and to share the dream with them, to say, I'm really passionate about the environment, and I've been president of the green team, and I've been working on climate change, and I volunteer in my town, and maybe I want to be a sustainability engineer. It's not a contract, but they're like, wow, see, you're just trying things on, and you have a vision for yourself. And they want students who are going to be engaged learners in their community. That's really what they're asking by that question. And so I don't want students to feel that pressured, because they don't expect them. And all of my students changed. I had a student who said he was 100% certain he would be a biomedical engineer. And he applied to a college of engineering and wrote all of his essays about making prosthetic medical devices. And he took one inspiring computer science class, and he left the College of Engineering and went to the College of Arts and Sciences to major in computer science and work on AI. Right? So he was admitted.
Yeah, no, that's
because he had a passion, and he
Right.
was sharing like a potential vision he has for himself.
Yeah, I think it's a good way of looking at it. It's just framing it differently. Not that, you're locking into a career and you have to pretend that you're definitely going to become a dentist or whatever. But more, what do you like to do? And there, and I guess, you should be thinking about what you like to do when you're picking a college, right?
And we should be encouraging our kids from a very early age to dream about what they want to be when they grow up. That's all that essay is really asking. What's the dream, right? If dream big, what difference do you want to make? And I tell my students, even if you don't know, talk about a population you want to serve or a problem you want to solve. If you don't know, you can go really far if you say, I really care about kids. Right? And dreamcast that. If you say, I really care about climate change, I don't exactly know what pathway I might take, but I know that I want to address the climate crisis. Well, that's going to be really persuasive and compelling.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, well, let's move on to a different topic, one very, near and dear to my heart, parental involvement with the process. Maybe we should call this parental over-involvement with the process. I'm going to start by reading a quote from a book written by an author, Heather Choate Davis. It was a book about raising kids. And the quote, I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit, is from the section on the college admissions process. So she says, "We fluff them and fold them and nudge them and enhance them and bind them and break them and embellish them beyond measure. And then, as we drive them to their college interviews, that we truly believe is the gateway to their destiny, we tell them with a smile so tight it could crack nuts, just be yourself." I love that because it really hits home with me. Does this resonate with you in terms of some of the parents you've seen in your own practice?
Yeah. And I want to say I have a lot of empathy for parents. They're feeling the economic anxiety for their kids' futures. And so let's just start. I'm not ever going to bash parents. They love their kids and they come from a genuine place of wanting the best for their kids, and that's what parents want. It's what sometimes goes awry is in how do you achieve that? And this is true broadly in our culture right now with sort of helicopter and snowplow parents. It's just sort of missing how to actually achieve that. And how to actually achieve that is to empower your students' independence and intrinsic motivation and curiosity. And also, I think parents do not mean to, but they do make the college decision a referendum on their child's worth, inadvertently. And it also, to be compassionate towards them, they make it a referendum on their own parenting. Like, have I been a good parent if my student doesn't get accepted to an Ivy League university? And I just want to tell all the parents out there, you're doing great. If your student is curious and motivated and applying to college, you're already winning. And I think we need to really focus on that, like what a privilege that is. And I think ratchet down the pressure and really focus on cultivating the student and just not making it a referendum. And I do see well-meaning parents hire a tutor in every subject and 100 hours of SAT tutoring. And what happens when the student goes to college? Those training wheels get taken off and the student is really plunged into the deep end of the ocean and they don't have the skills to be successful and to thrive because they've had all these support systems in place. So over the course of high school, we need to be stepping back and removing some of those structures and letting the student fly.
That's a really important point. I think that's something that a lot of parents miss. Do you see that happen a lot where kids that have had that support and a lot of, there's a lot of finance that goes into that as well. Right. And when they go to college, the parents cannot help. And I would think a lot of times it goes from all to nothing.
Right.
So
yes, and that transition is increasingly difficult.
Yeah.
And we are seeing more and more involvement of parents at the college level. Literally calling professors, emailing professors, calling deans, calling presidents of the college because their student has anxiety and can't possibly attend class. And so the college should change its policy and let the student take classes remotely when it's an in-person discussion-centered class or a laboratory class. They are involving themselves. They mean well, but it is counterproductive. It is not the way to foster independence, strength, resilience, and success in adults.
It's counterproductive and it can't work, right?
Right.
You can't micromanage your kids when they're in college.
Right.
You probably can do it if you hire enough tutors when they're in high school.
Right.
So what do you do? I mean, off the top of my head, I think maybe one solution is, if your kid gets into their stretch school and they're one of those kids that needed a lot of support,
Right.
maybe you say, like, that is the wrong place for my kid.
Right.
It's academically too rigorous, and without all of the support they've had, they're not going to survive.
Well, and that becomes very quickly apparent by the end of the first semester, and certainly by the end of the first year. And those families reach out to me to help that student transfer. But now that student is transferring from a place of weakness instead of applying from a position of strength. So now they have failed 2 of their 4 or 5 classes.
Right.
So now their options for transferring are completely different than their options for applying coming out of high school from a position of strength. So I really work to talk to parents. We have a lot of data that it's really better to be in the top quartile of students at an institution than in the bottom quartile of students.
Interesting.
That you get more attention, you have better results, you have higher self-esteem, you feel more successful because you have command of the material, you're successful, and that builds self-esteem. Success is what builds self-esteem and confidence, right? And students can get a great education at a range of schools. The selectivity profile of the institution does not equate to its academic capacity to educate your child, right? Because Columbia has a 3% acceptance rate just doesn't make it better than Ohio State, it's better in some ways, but there are other schools that are going to be great for your student, better for your student, because they're going to have the academic support. I will say colleges are putting in place many more academic supports than they ever have because, well, they need to. We're seeing a quarter of entering classes are coming in on a 504 and IEP. So colleges are spending millions of dollars investing in mental health resources, writing center resources, tutoring resources, sort of on-ramping remedial classes to help students acquire the college readiness skills they need. But parents need to understand that that comes at a cost, right? Those millions of dollars that colleges are investing are going to get passed on to the consumer.
So for parents who have kids with ADHD or other disabilities, I assume that's something they should really look into. What resources are available at these colleges for those kids? That's
right. And every college has an Office of Accessibility Resources. There are learning success specialists that will meet with your student. I'm thrilled that we are advancing equity in American higher education. There are more opportunities for students on the autism spectrum, nonverbal learning disabilities, ADHD, executive functioning challenges. They can and they should attend college. But they do need to be proactive and advocate for themselves and seek out those resources and meet with that success coach once a week to organize your calendar and understand juggling assignments and juggling different faculty expectations and workloads. The colleges are putting those supports in place, but obviously some colleges, again, smaller institutions, some colleges have more of those resources and are sort of just resourcing that area of their institution more than others.
Interesting. There's something you said, which I think is so important to, tease out a little bit, because it has such a huge impact on the schools that parents or kids are going to push for in terms of where they end up. It's that what you said about, kids thrive when they're in the top quartile. Yeah. They thrive when they're successful, and it only goes up from there. The devil's advocate will say, and I think there's an equal number of parents who believe this. Well, I believe that, having your kid go to the best college in terms of academic rigor that they get into, that's where they should go, because they'll rise to the occasion. They'll be influenced by those
Smart
around
peers,
them. Exactly. So what do you say to that tension?
So there's a significant difference between rigor and branding. So you can get a rigorous education at a whole host of institutions. But I understand your point is about branding, about an institution that has national and international name recognition, right? I understand that pressure, but we have excellent longitudinal studies that tell us that it's what the student studies, and it's sort of reaching for that. You don't necessarily have to have a degree from one of those institutions, you have to study something that you love and you have to be engaged in your education. So students who have a high degree of satisfaction in their education. Now, obviously, I know full well, and I coach my students appropriately, that if they're in investment banking, if they want to go to medical school, there are obviously certain schools that the top firms recruit at. But parents need to be really cautious, because many in these industries actually don't want those students from the most elite institutions. I had a partner at Fidelity tell me that he wouldn't hire a student from an Ivy League school because they don't hustle, they don't have the same hunger, and they have an expectation of rising too quickly or not paying their dues. So I don't think that we can assume that across the board. I certainly know that there are important exceptions in certain fields, but it's really what the student is going to learn, what qualities are going to get developed while they're at that institution. And if they work hard and they are smart, I think now the landscape in hiring is so different that it's really the competencies and skills you bring to that interview, less than, just, it used to be that if you just got a degree from the top 20 schools, and that's just no longer the case in the marketplace.
Yeah, I read an article, this was a while back, but you raise a good point about the perceptions of a hiring manager of somebody with an Ivy League degree versus something else.
Sure.
But this article is about...
It gets you to the interview,
yeah,
but your skills get you the position.
Yeah, exactly. But this was talking about, I think they looked at, 200 CEOs, and they looked at the schools they went to.
Right.
And what they found was that the schools that had the highest, incidence of people becoming CEOs were not the very top schools.
Right.
And they postulated that maybe it was, certain qualities of people that end up being more important, if you want to become a CEO,
Yes.
Are more weighty than just pure academic success. So it's interesting. Your point is well taken, that, the goal isn't always, in terms of branding, get them to the school that has like the best, best brand. Right. So, in terms of, we were talking about parental involvement. What can parents do to actually help, to really participate? And I understand, this needs to be the kids' responsibility. This is their time to start taking on, ownership. Yeah, exactly. But what can parents actually do in the process to help?
Yeah, I think talking about it sooner. Not to put pressure, but actually to alleviate pressure. To say, college is really important, but why? I want students to know their why, to have a really sharp and clearly defined why as they embark on the process. And so parents can talk about their own experiences. Earlier, freshman year, sophomore year, get onto a few campuses and really see, start talking and just poking around wow, this is so cool. What is data science? And it involves math and computer science. Wow, you really like both of those things. This would be cool. Let's check that out. So really embark on it not as this pressure cooker, right, rat race, but as this exciting journey of intellectual exploration, and be wow, would it be cool for you to be in a lab and be working with a professor, or would you rather be writing on a newspaper and conducting investigative journalism? Just talking to and cultivating your students' passions. I want more parents having conversations less about what was the grade and more about, what did you think about that? How did you feel? Did you enjoy learning about that? Or what was that project like? Or what was your biggest accomplishment? What was your biggest struggle? Just really focus on a growth mindset of the process and not be this stress-filled outcome.
Yes.
Right? You have to get to the brass ring because we know that if you engage in the process meaningfully, you will have a better outcome.
Yeah. Well, I hope parents are listening, because I think that's really good advice. So as we wrap up here, I think that's a great takeaway for parents. And again, I hope they're listening and take it to heart. What would be, as we as I said, as we wrap up here, the takeaway for the kids? What would you say is the big picture takeaway that, if there's one thing you'd like them to kind of remember from this conversation, what would that be?
Yeah, you're the star of the show. This is your journey. It's not anyone else's. Your parents already went where they went. This is your journey. And so really think about who you are and what you want out of that experience. No, get in touch with your why. See, I want to go to college because, and these are the experiences I want to have, and it's your journey and have fun with it instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, will I please my parents? Will I impress other people? This is about you. You know what? Once you get there, no one's there with you. No one's going to do the work for you, and it's going to be your experience. So like seize the day, sort of carpe diem, and make it yours.
Yeah, that's a great message. So this has been wonderful. Thanks. Thank you so much. It's, your information is so helpful. I think it's going to help a lot of people out there.
I hope so.
So really appreciate you coming in.
Thanks.
So thank you, Dr. Aloise.
Thanks.
Much appreciated. Welcome back. So one of the things that I couldn't help thinking when I listened to Dr. Aloise is that when you hire a consultant, regardless of what they're expert in, it's incredibly important to gauge someone who is, at her core, a good person with the right perspective on life. Hopefully, after listening to Dr. Aloise speak, you share my view that she's tops in both of these areas. As a parent of 2 kids currently going through the college process, I especially appreciated her sympathizing with us parents who are just trying to do right by our kids, but are living in a time when just meeting the bare minimum takes every ounce of energy, self-restraint, and diligence. One of the points that hit home for me the most was when she said about getting caught up in the brand name of prestigious colleges. I mean, I have to admit, when I hear that someone went to an Ivy League school or MIT or Stanford, I'm always impressed. So I can't help but wish that for my own kids. It's funny, people say, once you're out in the working world, nobody looks at what college you went to. It doesn't matter at that point. But I don't believe that's entirely true. When I was managing corporate legal departments and had to hire a lawyer, I definitely paid attention to where candidates went to college and law school. But Dr. Aloise, of course, is correct that brand name of the school is just one factor among many that determines success. And it's not even the most important factor. In fact, in some cases, it can even work against you. I've seen it many times. People went to the most prestigious colleges who often think they could rest on their laurels. But those who went to schools that aren't as renowned sometimes, work harder when they get out into the, quote, real world. Anyway, helping my own kids through the college process has had its challenges, but overall, it's given me a chance to bond with them at a different level than other things that we've done together. I mentioned earlier that I took them on college tours this past April vacation. We hit schools in Connecticut, New York, and Pennsylvania. We probably averaged about 2 tours a day, which in retrospect was probably a bit too ambitious. But we generally had fun, and for me, the highlight of the trip was getting to go back to Lehigh and seeing my much-loved alma mater through my kids' eyes. We were scheduled to see Lehigh the Thursday morning of spring break and had all afternoon to drive from Connecticut to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is where Lehigh is located. Since we had extra time, we decided to stop by Lafayette College, which is about a half hour from Lehigh. While we were driving, I explained to the kids that Lafayette was Lehigh's arch rival in football and is the most played in one of the oldest football rivalries in the history of the United States. So since the drive to Lafayette was long, I got to tell the kids my own personal experience with the annual Lehigh-Lafayette football game. It started when I was a freshman and ran for class president. I was an unlikely candidate because I was one of those kids that didn't immediately take to college life. I was homesick, awkward, and was anything but stoic. In other words, I complained a lot. But I won the election thanks to a bunch of loyal friends who helped me hang signs and knock on doors. As class president, my only real initiative was a class fundraiser in which we would design and sell some form of memorabilia for the Lehigh-Lafayette football game. We didn't have the budget for sweatshirts or even t-shirts, so we settled on baseball caps. Our vice president, Kevin Clayton, took charge of working with the supplier to create the hats. Unlike me, Kevin came to Lehigh with a pedigree, was well-adjusted, and had Ken doll good looks. And I suspected from early on that when it came time for re-election, Kevin might be challenging my incumbency. Anyway, on the hat design, he explained to me that we wouldn't be able to fit the words Lehigh-Lafayette Weekend on the front of the hats, at least within our budget. Therefore, we had to settle for the abbreviated version, LEH/LAF, Lee-Laf. At first, I recoiled. I remember thinking it looked kind of stupid, but it looked like we didn't have any viable options, so I approved the design. And as it turns out, the hats were not the rage we hoped they would be. In fact, they were a big flop that became a running joke on campus that haunted me for the months that followed and led to my failed presidency. Note to self, next time you embark on a sales campaign of commemorative apparel, abbreviating the main event into something as unappealing as Lee Loff is a really bad idea. And as if to rub salt in the wound, there is a big picture of me in the Lehigh yearbook that year wearing the Lee Loff hat, which will flash on the screen now. You'll see Lee Loff peeking out of the top of the hat, and the day of the Lehigh Lafayette game, November 21, 1981, just underneath. And I think you could see me wearing was this long black coat I bought at a thrift shop in Bethlehem. You know, that picture, I remember it very well. It was taken on the day of the big Lehigh Lafayette game, and I had taken all the Lee Loff hats and put them in my laundry basket and carried them from my fraternity down to Taylor Stadium. And on the way, I was on a sidewalk on the side of a road, and this Volkswagen Bug stopped right at me. They had this carload of kids. They were all laughing hysterically. It was the first time I ever heard the song Dirty Laundry. And I could hear it playing, and they were laughing. And then right when they got to the line that said, "Give me dirty laundry," they just erupted in laughter, and I got offended. And I was like, it's not laundry in the laundry basket, it's my Lee Loff hats. Anyway, they drove away laughing, and I remember the humiliation I felt on that day. Went to the stadium. I don't think we sold more than like 10 hats the whole day. But that was, kind of the low point of my year. Anyway, later that year, Kevin did run against me in my re-election bid and beat me by 1 vote. I think because the election was so close, the loss was particularly painful. And I couldn't help but feel like stung by Kevin, even though he really did nothing wrong. He ran against me and he won. He was entitled to. But everybody needs a nemesis, so Kevin fit that role perfectly for me during my Lehigh years. But getting back to our college tours, after seeing Lafayette, the next morning we made it on time for our Lehigh tour. I wouldn't have expected that day to bring a couple of ironic twists to the story I'd recounted from 40 years ago, but that's what happened. Before the actual tour, all the students and their parents were ushered into a large auditorium for an information session in which the head of the admissions office, they tell you all the cool things about the school. And of course, he talked about the big football event of the year, but I have to tell you, I almost fell out of my chair when I heard him refer to it as the so-called Lee Loff game. Other than as the object of ridicule during the whole baseball hat nightmare, I never heard that term used in all my years at Lehigh. And my kids, of course, thought it was hilarious, but I consoled myself with the thought that I actually played some part in Lehigh's history, such as it was. A crueler irony came during the actual campus tour. As a side note, if you ever get the chance to visit Lehigh, you really should. It's really beautiful. It was built on the side of a mountain with these huge, ornate collegiate stone buildings, and then some, modern buildings kind of around the periphery. But the crown jewel of the campus is the University Center, which is this huge Gothic structure set at the top of a sweeping green lawn and overlooking the main campus. So you have to imagine my shock when our tour group approached the building and I saw the new name of the building. It's now the Clayton University Center. I did some digging, and although I knew that Kevin stayed active with the university, I learned that he donated over $20 million for the renovation of the University Center, which now bears his name. I figured if he's donating that much money, he must have a ton more in the bank. So I did some more digging and learned that Kevin founded the private equity firm that owned the company that I worked for more than 8 years. In other words, Kevin was my boss's 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 boss. Now, just to understand this coincidence, I grew up in Connecticut. Kevin was from New Jersey. We went to school in Pennsylvania. I was working at the company in Massachusetts, and the private equity firm that he founded was in California. So just this incredible coincidence. And I was thinking to myself, like, really, God? Like I needed like another lesson in humility, and this one was a doozy. Finally, I should say, although I described Kevin as my nemesis, the reality was he's a really good guy. He always was. He was a much better class president than I was. I actually wasn't a very good class president. Other than the hat debacle, I didn't do much. I went to the cocktail parties, and I think that was about it. Anyway, as for the week of the tours with my kids, we had a great week together. And as far as colleges go, I know they're going to end up somewhere awesome. So I'm at peace with that. I also know that when someday I look back on the whole college process, I'll probably feel the same way I do about that I do about my involvement with the rest of the activities with my kids through the years. And that is that we shared some good times and laughs, but I was probably more over-involved than I should have been, at least according to the experts. And I'm sure some people would say that I should have given my kids more space and, so they could exercise their own independence. But see, I have this theory on raising kids. My theory is you can almost never give them too much attention, guidance, or support. And that even if they complain that you're in their face, way too much, as long as it's motivated by love, they ultimately appreciate it. It also gives them a level of confidence and security that stays with them their entire lives. And either way, they're going to assert their own independence, regardless of whether you hand it to them or not. So I'll leave that as our final note, but I'd love to hear from you on that or anything else on your mind. So just shoot me a note on our website at watchhearmeout.com. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.